What's going on, guys? So I'm just sitting here in the garage, quite literally watching the paint dry. You can see here a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the Mark II again. I know I got into it pretty well on my last channel before it disappeared. But anyway, I think I might just do a quick overview of the machine while it's drying. So I decided to go with a color pretty close to the factory gray that was on the fenders, the lighter gray. The footboards were the factory darker gray, like a charcoal looking color. So I just decided to make it all the OEM lighter gray. So I guess I'll just start from the back and work my way forward. The rear axle is a welded and gear swapped Peerless 820 out of a Murray garden tractor. The rear plate has been welded on, and I extended the back a little bit with a piece of plate steel and angle iron to assist in dropping the fenders because they had to be moved back slightly, just so the whole thing would look right. You can see the horns mounted right there. They came out of a 2000 Grand Prix that I parted out. Here you can see the fuel tank. I believe it's a 1.5 gallon out of a Murray lawn tractor, one of the stamped frame dealies. Had a flathead 11 horse. I parted that one out, not a big deal. It's actually, I think, the one that I cut the frame up to stiffen the frame of the original CraftsmanQuad. You can see the garage door T-bracket right there that I used as gussets. And then there's another one going across there in the front. You can just barely see it in front of the fuel tank. The fuel tank is just held in with zip ties, but it's very secure, it won't go anywhere. The battery goes in the stock location, but I added a couple of things to lift the battery tray. I added that post right there just to keep the battery tray from sliding back and going away from the little lip I welded here on the seat hinge. Just a simple little extension up at about a 45-degree angle. And that just holds the front lip of the battery box and lifts it up just high enough so it doesn't hit the pulley. Again, I had to do that because of the fender drop, which also in turn dropped the seat and my center of gravity. The seat sits right above this piece of T-bracket here and is held in with 2 3/8 bolts. The back tires, I believe, are 18-inch. Yep, 18 by 9.5 by 8 Kenda Pathfinders. And then the fronts I got off the same quad as I got the backs, and they are 19 by 7 by 8, also Kenda Pathfinders. So it's kind of got that staggered stance a little bit with the bigger tires in the front, kind of like a dirt bike. But that's how they were on the quad. So you know, they brought the chassis to the ride height I liked, and overall I think it's got a pretty good look. These are the factory axle shafts with the 4-bolt hubs, also from the four-wheeler, welded directly to it. I had to drill them out because they were splined and I didn't have a keyway broach. And I plan on replacing this rear axle anyway, so when I do, I can just get new hubs. It sits almost square. It's a little bit wider in the front. Now obviously I have the shocks off of it for paint, but the chassis sits almost level, and I need to work out the steering some more just to get it even drivable, because right now it's just horrendous. It will get a rack and pinion eventually, but right now it has a steering gearbox in it from a Cub Cadet 1440, I believe is what it was, a 1994. And then it's just got this little homemade adapter right here that adapts the factory Craftsman upper steering shaft, which allows me to run the hub and original steering wheel. And I did that because these steering wheels are really easy to find. They're a nice design with the spline hub in there, that aluminum hub that fits nice down onto the steel shaft. So when I redo the steering, that top section right there I'm gonna leave alone, because I really like just having spare steering wheel availability, because when these things roll, that steering wheel usually does get broke. The shifter was made using the original deck height lever and the shaft still just goes right straight across. I'll see if I can tuck you down in here. Goes right straight across. There's the shearing shifter linkage. It was not too terribly hard to make. I used a factory tie rod that connects the two front wheels together. Just cut it, overlapped it, and welded it back at the right length. Came out pretty good, works well. For some reason, I don't have reverse. I'm not sure why, but I did it in such a way that all I have to do is pull it back and neutral. It just clicks right there in the notch, and then I have to push the button to pull it all the way back in reverse. I have to push the button to shift it into first so I don't accidentally bump it when I'm getting off the machine and it's idling, warming up, or something like that. So I just tried to work that in there as a little safety catch, which ended up working well. For some reason, I can't get the E-clips to stay in here. I may end up going to like snap rings, because I know those things are a bitch to get off when you want to get them off. So I know it won't come off if I don't want it to come off. Right now there's a gap between the bottom of the fender and the back of the wheel well, so I'm going to fix that with this C-channel right here I've got from an old house trailer. It's just gonna go pretty much right there as a gap, or to bridge the gap between the fenders and the wheel well. And the reason I have it turned this way is so I have something to dig my heels into when I'm going down the hill, so I can stand up and lean back behind the seat without my feet like sliding off the front. I ran it at Haspin just with that open gap, and I didn't think I would like it, but I ended up digging my heels of my boots right here, just that corner, right on the very back of the footboards, and I ended up really liking the way that felt, just purely from a driving standpoint. I know they're going to pack up with mud, but it should be pretty easy just to scoop them out, so I'm not too worried about it. And that will add my strength back into my fenders, because, or not my fenders, well, those two, but the footboards mainly, because by the time Haspin was over, the footboards were slanted down pretty bad. So yeah, for the engine, I have a video coming on the new Vanguard that I picked up. So I'll do a walk through that, show where I got it, what I paid for it, stuff like that. Red Z02 and Richie Rich Overdrive both helped out a ton in getting me the parts I need to put another engine together. And if the build-off had more time, I would definitely get it together and use it. But unfortunately, I just don't think I've got the time right now. So I'm gonna have to go with the new one, which is okay. It's a bolt-in, turnkey, ready-to-go engine. So I know I don't need to worry about it. But the sponsored engine will definitely get used. The block is from Richie Rich Overdrive. I'm going to use the original 18 horse heads from the slant single that was on this thing at Haspin. And Red Z02 shipped me a set of pistons, rings, and connecting rods for it. So it's going to be a 16 horse block, 14 horse internals, and 18 horse heads. So I think that'll roughly equal out to about 17 horsepower. I'll use the 18 horse carburetor on that as well. It's just a smaller bore. I think the stroke is the same. So, I mean, it's not a huge deal. That's still quite a bit of power for a lightweight machine like this. Here's the shocks I'm using. They don't have a whole lot of dampening, but the spring rate and the length and everything is just perfect for the weight that's on the nose of this thing. I was worried that it would be too heavy in the front and that these shocks just wouldn't work, but they ended up being perfect. I really like the way the front end performed at Haspin. But with that being said, I did cut it all off and re-weld it on in a different location. You can see the distance between the top of that piece of angle iron and the bolt. I originally had the frame of this thing sitting a lot lower in the front, and I just didn't like the geometry of the suspension or the steering, so I went ahead and redid that, and when I did that, my tie rods became way too long. Even with them adjusted all the way in, bottoming them out in the little heim joints there, it's still just far too long, so I need to cut and weld those just to get the alignment back in for the build-off video, which isn't a huge deal. As you can see, I've got a plate welded to the front. The Vanguard I flipped around backwards so the crankshaft faces forward and the heads face backwards, and then moved the whole thing about 6 inches forward, which brings my weight bias farther forward for climbing. Along the edge of the frame, you can see I welded angle iron all the way back to right here where the end of the frame, or at least the end of the flat frame, stops and goes to the twin vertical plate. I think later on I may weld a piece of rebar from the back of the frame all the way to the front here along the bottom, or at least to right here, and that will strengthen up this middle section a lot better. I didn't have too many issues with flex and Haspin. The suspension really takes care of a lot of that. It takes a lot of the strain off of the frame itself. But purely from a durability standpoint, I may end up adding that just so things don't fatigue quite as quickly. The wiring harness is pretty basic. Push button start with a single toggle to shut it off. It has a push button horn. No headlights at the moment, but I do have the factory switch. It will get LED pods eventually when I do the new hood, maybe a light bar in the hood. I have a bumper for it, I just haven't had time to mess with putting it on yet. I will need to make a rear bumper eventually. Oh, it's got drum brakes in the front. This whole front suspension is off of a 110cc Chinese quad, and with that came the spindles and hubs and everything like that. So it has drum brakes in the front, which to my knowledge I'm the only one at Haspin that will be running front brakes, and it's going to be really nice on the downhills because all your weight transfers forward. A lot of the weight comes off the back tires and you just end up sliding down the hill with your back tires locked up anyway. So with the front, I'm going to have a lot more control over not exactly decelerating, but the declines. So yeah, I think it's going to be set up pretty well for Haspin next year. I'm not going to have time to do the steering for the build-off, like I said, but I'm hoping to put out the build-off video sometime next week with the new engine and with the steering adjusted. So also I have a video of the whole thing with the sponsored engine, putting that together, issues I ran into during the whole thing. What ended up happening was not my original plan, but thanks again to those guys for helping me out in a pinch. It really sucks it's not going to be done in time, but you know, it'll still go to good use, I promise. So anyway, I think I'm going to end it here. Ask any questions in the comment section in case there was something that I touched on and didn't fully explain it, or something that you want to see. So yeah, just let me know. See ya.